So I have to ask you then, if I'm a single person,
Yes.
and with what you've just told me about the brain, I'm trying to increase the probability that someone will be attracted to me and form a relationship to me, what kind of behavior do I need to be embodying because I want to reduce the fear part of their brain so that they're more comfortable, and I want that oxytocin and dopamine to be firing?
Yes, absolutely. So quite often people say to me, how can I hack my first date? So the way you can hack your first date is you can do an activity which releases beta endorphin and dopamine and oxytocin. The best one I have found, which I appreciate is a niche interest, is some form of dancing in couples. Ballroom dancing, tango, whatever it is. Because, first of all, you're touching. So you get released oxytocin and beta endorphin. They're both released by touch. You're moving around. As any gym bunny knows, exercise produces beta endorphin. Hopefully you're not that great at this, so you're going to laugh a lot because you're actually a little bit rubbish. Okay, so you're releasing lots and lots of lovely oxytocin, dopamine, and beta endorphin doing that. Then afterwards, you need to go and have a curry. Okay, because beta endorphin evolved initially as your body's painkiller. That's still a role it has. Over time, it's been co-opted into our social sphere. But we know you have pain receptors in your gut. So if you have a curry, your gut gets a little bit irritated because it's a little bit spicy, so don't have a korma, and it produces beta endorphin. And we know that will also help you feel more euphoric, help you feel more relaxed, and help that person be more attracted to you because they will also get a hit of it. So that's your ideal date. I appreciate it's very niche and not everyone will want to do that, but there are ways.
And then I'm going to take her to the comedy store.
Yeah, and have a really good belly laugh. A proper laugh produces beta endorphin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Had we finished with the...
Well, so what you're doing, your biological market value comes out. As I say, you hit dopamine, oxytocin, your amygdala quietens, you feel much more confident, you feel much more chilled. Dopamine motivates you to walk across the bar and off you go and you strike up conversation. And that is the way attraction works in all mammals. It's completely unconscious. So you don't know any of this is happening. What's different in humans is very quickly after that, particularly once they've opened their mouth, it all starts kicking off in the outer area of the brain, so your neocortex. So the major social area of the brain is here. This is your prefrontal cortex. Mm-hmm. And your prefrontal cortex is where all those social abilities sit, so trust, reciprocity, ability to maintain, ability to abstract about your relationship, or ability to daydream about what it's going to be. And that's where all that sits. So we start seeing firing off here. And what's really important for human love is there is a connection between this area of the brain, which is known as the striatum, which is unconscious, and this area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. So your unconscious brain and your conscious brain can work together in attraction. And also this area of the brain at the back, which is known as the mentalizing, empathizing area of the brain. So we need to have empathy in relationships. It's the basis of love. So understanding someone's emotional state and being able to respond to it appropriately. Mm-hmm. And also mentalizing. So mentalizing is mind reading. What's their intention? What are they going to do next? You need it for conversation. You also need it to spot a cheat, because you need to check someone's intention. So the mentalizing area of the brain is important. The sad bit, and I'll explain this in a minute, is unfortunately that bit shuts down a little bit, which isn't very helpful, but we'll talk about that. So then as soon as they open their mouth, you start to contemplate them consciously. And what you contemplate consciously in terms of your attraction can actually override the unconscious bit. So you might have had this amazing feeling of, lust and chemistry as you walk across the bar thinking, wow, this person's amazing. I'm feeling astonishing. They open their mouth and they say something to you which is just, unconscionable or awful, or they've got no sense of humour, or they're really unkind, or whatever it might be. And suddenly that bit will step in and go, nope, this person is not for me. And that can override the biology. But that's why what we say, and I always say the brain is the sexiest organ in the body, because ultimately it's what you express with your brain that is going to really determine whether or not this love is going to go anywhere. And that's what you say. Because ultimately, as humans, the thing that makes us the most successful species on the planet is our brain. Not your shoulder-waist ratio, not your waist-hip ratio. It's actually your brain, because you want your kid to have the most creative, flexible, funny, intelligent, emotionally intelligent brain they can have. And that's what you're looking for in a partner in the long term.
So based on what you know about attraction and falling in love and all those things, what is like the worst thing one could say in terms of the themes, the types of things someone could say that would just completely put you off?
So I think probably the absolutely worst thing you can say, and this comes from a lot of data saying what's the most important, is to say something unkind. So we know, regardless of everything else, The one thing that people want in a long-term relationship is somebody kind. So something critical of somebody else in the room, particularly something critical. I mean, you don't know what that person's interests are, but something critical about something that's very important to them. Don't be unkind.
The waiter, waitress.
Yeah, exactly. That's why how people treat, I mean, personally, I find people who treat waiters enraging, badly enraging. That's why. Because it's a real representation of who you are at your core. Or they express a value which goes completely against a value that you have. Because we know in terms of long-term compatibility, it's things to do with personality, it's things to do with long-term values or beliefs that are the most important things. So let's say somebody said something horrendously homophobic or something like that, or something racist. That's an immediate right. No, this person is not for me.
What about icks? Because icks seem to have emerged as like I've got a friend of mine who's, she's never been in a relationship. She's just 37 years old, 38 years old. And I remember one day she was like, Steve, what am I doing wrong? And I was never really a dater, so I have no right to tell someone what they're doing right or wrong. But she showed me her dating profile. And in the dating profile, she said to me, I said no to this guy. And I looked at this guy and I fucking hell, he's like a stud. He's beautifully good looking, was really, really kind in the messages he'd sent. She goes, but if you look in the background of his photo, there's boxes on top of his wardrobe. And she was like, so I said no.
Right.
Now, from an evolutionary perspective, you go, okay, maybe he's living at his mum's house, maybe he's just moved in, maybe whatever. Maybe he's not a settled person. But really, there is become a culture of women and men excluding each other based on extremely surface level things. Now I'm like, is that the prefrontal cortex doing its job, or is that something else?
It is the prefrontal cortex doing its job. I would say it's not doing its job terribly well. The ick is a really recent thing that was generated by social media, and this idea of narrowing in closer and closer and closer on what people like to call red flags. And you don't get a lot of information from online dating because you don't get a lot of sensory information to help you make a decision. So people become more and more obsessed with what's in the image. What's in the image? What can I get about this person? And they start to become obsessed with tiny, tiny things. What ultimately people find attractive is very, very complicated. There are so many different things that feed into attraction. Whether or not somebody has boxes on top of their wardrobe is very unlikely to be even vaguely important in terms of compatibility. I don't think they should be called dating apps. I think they should be called introduction apps. And that's actually what the great Helen Fisher said. She said they're introduction apps. They broaden your pool. They make more people available to you. That's it. You're not having a date on that app. You're not learning about that person on that app. You're literally seeing them for the first time, and as soon as you can get in the room with them, and you can let your brain do what it's really good at, 500,000 years of evolution, that's what you should do. Because they handicap your brain. They give you very little information to go into that algorithm.
You said something really interesting there, which kind of dovetails into what I was saying about my friend who's never dated but is struggling in dating. I know a growing number of people that are going on like 100 dates a year and having no luck. And just like mathematically, I go, surely there must have been someone suitable in that pool of 100 people a year that you've met.
Yeah.
What is going on here?
It's two things, I think. First of all, as I've said, it's the low cost of dating apps. So in the old days, when I was dating, going on a date was a real investment of time and energy. So you would probably meet someone at work, you'd meet someone at a bar, you'd meet someone through a friend, which was a real blind date, and you'd spend your time thinking, what am I going to wear? And I've got to go somewhere with this person and spend some time with this person, probably some financial investment as well, get myself all ready, spend an evening with them. And that was how you were going to meet somebody. So you invested time, and you weren't going to do that unless you were serious, to be honest, because otherwise I'll stay at home, I'll do something else, I'll go to the pub with my friends. Whereas now, because we can do it, we can literally go on a dating app anywhere, on the tube, while we're cooking dinner, while we're watching Netflix, anytime you want. It's low cost, low investment.
I read a study that showed, it was in a different context, but it essentially showed that the amount you invest in something correlates to the amount that you appreciate the thing.
Absolutely.
They did this study where they let people into a boring forum without having to pass any entry test. And then they asked them how much they appreciated the boring forum, and people said it's boring.
Yes.
And then they got another group of people. They made them go through this sort of rigorous test to get into this boring forum, and then they asked them how much do you appreciate the forum. They said it's great.
Yeah.
I'm obviously paraphrasing there, but it just showed this link between the amount you invest in a process is the more you appreciate it. And I think back to being 14 years old, going on my first date, and the whole process of getting ready to go to the cinema and thinking about my outfit for 3 days and then going there and being nervous, and I didn't have much money, so this was like a big thing. And then how much, I almost felt like I fell in love with the person really irrespective. Just because of the effort I'd put in, feel like I fell in love with them. So
it's partly the low cost thing. It's partly because all those people that, if you were doing it in person, your brain would filter out. Let's say there were 100 people in the room. Your brain would quite quickly filter out most of them as no, maybe one or two might do. Because you can't filter in that way on an app, you kind of take the punt on all these dates because you're like, otherwise, how else am I going to actually meet this person? You can't just have a casual chat by the coffee machine at work or, meet them through some friends in the pub, where you would do that assessment without really making that much effort. Whereas because on a dating app, the only way you can meet that person is to actually go on a date with them and do all that, you will end up going on 100 to do that filtering process. So it's partly that as well. And the last thing is the paradox of choice.
Yeah.
So we are really, really bad at making choices when there's a lot of options. And the paradox of choice is very powerful in relation to dating apps. Because literally, particularly if you're good looking and you get a lot of matches, there's like a smorgasbord of people out there that you can carry on flipping or you can make a choice. And our brains are not set up for that. 100 years ago when we were trying to find a partner, you would maybe have the people in your village who you grew up with to choose from. If you had a horse, you could maybe have the people in the next village or even a town. Wow. And that was who you chose from. And it was a very small pool. Now you can go anywhere in the world, turn on your dating app and possibly have, hundreds of people to meet. And your brain can't do that.
I mean, we can all think about it as well in the context of restaurants. If you go to Thailand, they give you like a catalogue.
Yes.
The menu is a catalogue. They're like, we will make anything.
Yeah. And you're like, oh,
and you sit there for
like,
45 minutes thinking, do I want fish, chicken, eggs? But then you go to like a London fancy restaurant and there's like, we do this. Yeah. This is it.
So that's why you end up with people who, yes, go on 100 dates and don't actually end up with anybody because they haven't had that opportunity to filter.
Monogamy and polyamory.
Yes.
So can you define both of those words?
Yeah.
And the thing that I found really striking is, I think I heard you say that satisfaction in either dynamic there, polyamory or monogamy, is roughly the same. Because I thought people in monogamous relationships were supposed to be way more happy than people that are in polyamorous relationships.
No, not at all. So monogamy is a relationship state where there are two people who are... We have to define two sorts of monogamy. There's sexual monogamy. And that is you are exclusive to that other person. Sexually, you have sex with nobody else. And there is social monogamy. And that is you live with that person exclusively. So within the UK, most people, let's say if they have children, are socially monogamous. They live in a household with their children with two people in it. Whereas sexual monogamy, you can be socially monogamous and not sexually monogamous. So they're two different things. But monogamy, if we talk about it in sort of lay terms, is two people who are exclusive to each other. In terms of love, in terms of sex, and in terms of possibly living together. Monogamy itself is a social construct, mostly. We are not a monogamous species. There are, in fact, very few monogamous species in the world. Maybe, I think I read a book the other day that says something like 0.002% of the animals on this planet are monogamous. Because what you will see in the wild and what you see mostly with humans is social monogamy. They live together. But we know that the infidelity rate sits generally at around 50%. So 50% of those households are not sexually monogamous. And in fact, from an evolutionary point of view, being sexually monogamous is a really quite bad idea because you are limiting yourself to a very narrow gene pool. And that's why there are very few creatures in the world that are truly sexually monogamous. When I was doing my master's, my professor studied gibbons. Gibbons at the time were known to be the monogamous ape. And he did a really longitudinal study, and he was the first to realise that no, they weren't. They were all sneaking off and doing it behind the rock with somebody else. But they were living together. But the female was going to find some better genes somewhere else. This guy, brilliant parent, not great genes. I'm going to go behind a rock and mate with this really good-looking gibbon over here because I'm going to get some good genes, and then he's going to raise the kid. And the guy is like, well, I'm obviously going to have offspring here, but actually, mating with another female is not particularly costly to me, so I'll just go and do that over there, and let's hope she can raise them on her own, or maybe her partner will raise them for me. So there are very few. So we have monogamy in mainly in the West because it's a socially prescribed form of organisation. And it was imposed because it is a form of control. It mainly sits in terms of rules, particularly in religion, but also there are many legal rules. For example, in Britain, you can't have two marriages, you can't be a bigamist. And it's about making everybody control. Because if we all just gave in constantly to precisely what our drives were saying, there'd be kind of chaos. And those in power wouldn't be able to predict what anybody is going to do, because actually I'm just going to go, I feel, sexually attracted to whoever that is over there. I'm going to go mate with them, but I'm going to come back and live here. But then I've got a kid over there, and it's all really, really confusing. So over time, when civilization first arose, the more complex we got, and as we started to live together in cities, those in control were like, okay, I really need to be able to predict what these lesser beings are going to do. So I'm going to impose monogamy. You can only live with one person and basically have sex with one person. Nobody actually ever only had sex with one person, but we're going to look like we do. And those are the rules. And that's why we have legitimacy rules about children and inheritance and all that kind of thing, because it maintains control. So monogamy is, simply a social construct. It's not something that we've biologically evolved to do. And we know that part, there are many countries in the world where monogamy isn't what is prescribed.
How are those cultures getting on, the ones that aren't monogamous?
Fine.
What cultures are those?
So you tend to get, so for example, in certain religions, so in certain forms of Islam, for example, men can have many wives. There are certain tribes which exist within sort of South America and in certain areas of Africa where you can have many wives. For example, there are some groups in Nepal, in the Himalayas, where we have what's known as polyandry. So one woman has many husbands. Usually, the reason why these different groupings evolved, like monogamy, is it's something to do with economics, generally. So, for example, in Nepal, in these areas, because they still have male inheritance of land, if, let's say we've got a family farm and there's 5 brothers, if all of those 5 brothers split the inheritance, then that farm would become uneconomic. You wouldn't be able to farm it and make money. So over time, what's evolved is one woman will marry all the brothers, so that when they inherit the farm, they will all carry on passing down, essentially.
So if it goes against our evolutionary design to be in monogamous relationships, doesn't that mean that there's a lot of people who are struggling against their...
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we have a reasonably high rate of people who have extramarital affairs. It's also why people who are polyamorous, or indeed have open relationships, say, actually, it's the more truthful way of being human. Because all they're doing is following their drives, and they actually believe that it's more moral. Because if you put forward a monogamous front and you have an affair, you are lying to people. You are keeping a secret from people you profess to love. Whereas if you're polyamorous or you're in an open relationship, you're actually openly saying, this is my drive, this is the reality, and I'm being truthful with everybody about it. So you can enter a relationship with me or not on the basis of truth. And that's what a lot of polyamorous people particularly will argue, is that they're really representing what is, for most people, an ancestral state. Polyamory is difficult because, unlike open relationships such as swinging or being open, we call them consensual non-monogamy, that's just based on sex. So you're not spreading your love relationship, that emotional investment, that emotional intimacy amongst more than one person. Polyamory is being open and having several sexual partners and also having several emotionally intimate relationships at the same time. And I think people struggle more with that because of the issues of jealousy and the fact that goes quite strongly against even our social ideas about monogamy, where we all sort of live in pairs.
I've got a friend of mine that's secretly in an open polyamorous relationship, basically where there's 2 couples and they are together.
Yeah.
So there's 4 of them, basically. But they don't talk about it publicly because of the judgment.
Yeah.
And I think maybe part of the issue is that judgment that's...
For the polyamorous people I've interviewed, particularly for my book, that was the major thing, is that they were very happy in the relationship. The relationships were going really, really well. But what was difficult was being open about it, particularly with, for example, I'm talking to one woman who was like older members of the family. So she was going to a family wedding. And when she went to these occasions with this family, she could only ever take one of her partners. It always had to be the same partner, because they had no idea the other partner existed, because that would be very difficult for them to take. Also, we know from studies that have been done looking at people's attitudes to polyamorous people, they are seen as immoral, they are seen as unloving, they're seen as cold, because they have this ability to love lots of many, so they can't truly love anybody because they're splitting their heart between all these different people. Polyamorous people look at it the other way. As I've said, they actually think it's very moral because they're being truthful. Polyamorous relationships tend to be based on very open communication. That's one of the rules, is everybody still happy? Is everybody still happy with where the boundaries are? Has anybody upset anybody else? So it's very, very open. And they also believe that And in some ways, the support from this, we are able to love many friends at once. We're able to love many children at once. They say, actually, they don't split their heart. It's not a zero-sum game that you get 50% and you get 50%. Actually, that each time they take somebody into their lives, their heart just gets bigger.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favour. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.